The galactic arena was never meant for humanity. It was a spectacle, a blood sport where the greatest warriors of the cosmos clashed for dominance. Strength was everything. Civilizations proved their worth in the arena. Those who refused to participate were seen as weak, unworthy of diplomacy, undeserving of respect. Tonight, the Varkath Dominion, an empire built on conquest, had demanded a show of strength from humanity. The terms were simple: send a champion to fight or be treated as an inferior species, barred from trade, influence, and alliance. The arena, a vast coliseum suspended in the void of space, shimmered under the neon glow of alien spotlights. Towering over the battlefield stood Crothar the Unbreakable, the Dominion's reigning warlord, a 10-foot-tall behemoth covered in armored plates, his 4 crimson eyes scanning the battlefield with contempt. He had torn apart challengers from a dozen worlds. He had never lost. The audience, an assembly of galactic elites, roared with anticipation. They had seen countless species fight for their place in the stars, some honorable, some desperate, all ultimately crushed by the Dominion's champions. Then the humans stepped forward. Commander Elias Voss wasn't what they expected. No exosuit, no cybernetic enhancements, no genetically engineered frame. Just a man in combat fatigues, standing at barely 6 feet, unarmed and unarmored. Laughter rippled through the arena. A primitive? They send us a primitive? One of the alien commentators sneered. Crothar let out a low growl of amusement. I will break this one quickly. Voss cracked his knuckles. Yeah, give it your best shot. The gong sounded. Crothar charged. A blur of muscle and mass, faster than anything that size had a right to be. His warhammer whistled through the air, aimed to end the fight in a single blow. Voss didn't dodge. He stepped in. The crowd gasped as the human closed the distance, unnatural, reckless, insane. The hammer struck empty air. Voss was already inside Crothar's reach. One movement. One strike. A fist slammed into Crothar's throat, bypassing his armor entirely. The warlord staggered. For the first time in 100 battles, Crothar faltered. The laughter stopped. The human was smiling, and then, like a predator sensing weakness, he attacked. Crothar the Unbreakable had fought for centuries, crushing warlords, mercenaries, and challengers across the stars. He had shattered the bones of the mighty Graskan berserkers, torn the wings from the battle-hardened Avrak sky hunters, and brought the genetically engineered Terracine gladiators to their knees. Yet now, he was gasping for air. The humans' first strike had landed with surgical precision, not a desperate, flailing attack, but a calculated blow to the weak point beneath the armor plates of his throat. He stumbled backward, eyes wide in shock. No opponent had ever done this, not one. Voss didn't wait. Humans never waited. He closed the distance again, a sharp elbow into the warlord's ribs. Crack! The sound echoed through the arena. Crothar swung his massive hammer in retaliation, but missed again. The audience was no longer laughing. The Varkath Dominion had expected humanity to send an enhanced warrior, a cybernetic super soldier, or at least someone wielding advanced technology. Instead, they had sent a man, a baseline, unaugmented human. The Varkath elite, watching from their golden seats, sneered in disgust. One of their high generals, a reptilian, brute named Vornash, turned to the human diplomat in attendance, Ambassador Riker, and shook his scaled head. This is a disgrace, Vornash rumbled. We asked for a champion, and you send this fragile thing. Your kind has no concept of strength. Riker's face remained impassive. He's stronger than you think. The general scoffed, turning his attention back to the arena. The fight was still going. That, in itself, was shocking. The terms of the challenge were clear. If humanity's champion lasted more than 5 minutes against Crothar, the Dominion would recognize humanity as a worthy force in the galactic arena. If the human won, it would be a humiliation that the Varkath Dominion could never erase. They thought it was a mere formality. They were wrong. The galactic arena was an ancient battlefield, a place where civilizations proved themselves. It had settled interstellar disputes, determined the fate of planetary coalitions, and cemented alliances, or annihilated species from political relevance. The arena was not just about combat, it was about power. Humanity had arrived late to the galactic stage, barely 200 years into their expansion beyond Sol. They had made enemies fast. The Dominion saw them as upstarts, a species with no battle legacy, no warrior history among the stars. Compared to the ruthless warlords, the hive-mind conquerors, and the genetically perfected soldier races, humans were a mystery. They lacked the raw size of the Varkath, the advanced weaponry of the Trelzan, or the evolutionary resilience of the Enquari. Yet in every skirmish, every war, every contested system, humanity survived. The Dominion couldn't explain it. Humans weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. They weren't even the most advanced. But somehow, they endured. This challenge was meant to put an end to the questions, to force humanity into submission. Crothar was supposed to break their champion. Instead, he was the one struggling to stand. In the stands, an old Varkath warrior, a retired warlord named Rakvoth, watched with narrowed eyes. Unlike his younger counterparts, he wasn't sneering, he wasn't amused, he was studying. He had seen every kind of fighter in his time, the berserkers, the executioners, the tactical hunters. But this human was different. He wasn't a brute. He wasn't relying on superior technology. He wasn't overwhelming his opponent. He was waiting, learning. Humans adapted mid-fight. That was their strength. Rakvoth saw it before anyone else. Crothar had started the fight underestimating his opponent. He had thrown his most devastating attacks, massive sweeping blows that should have crushed the fragile human in one strike. And yet, not a single hit landed. The human was calculating. Every movement, every strike, every feint, Voss was reading. Crothar like a war strategist studying an enemy's weaknesses. He wasn't just fighting, he was deconstructing his opponent in real time. Rakvoth leaned forward. "This is no ordinary species," he muttered. "They are something else." Beside him, another Varkath noble scoffed. "He's just lucky." Rakvoth didn't reply. He knew better. This wasn't luck. This was a massacre waiting to happen. Crothar bellowed in frustration and lunged. A desperate move, abandoning defense in favor of raw force. Voss saw it coming. Sidestep, counter. One brutal strike into the joint of Crothar's knee. The warlord collapsed to one leg. Gasps filled the arena. Humans weren't supposed to be this fast. Humans weren't supposed to be this precise. Crothar tried to rise. Another blow struck his ribs, another to his jaw, another to his exposed throat. Each strike was measured, controlled. Voss wasn't fighting like a gladiator. He was dismantling his prey. The warlord's massive body sagged. His hammer slipped from his grasp. He fell to both knees. The arena fell silent, and that's when the fear began to set in. Up in the high seats, the Dominion's leaders, those who had sneered at humanity's supposed weakness, were now frozen. In their seats, the fight wasn't just still going, the human was winning. The realization struck them all at once. This wasn't just an upset, it was a message. Humanity hadn't sent their greatest warrior, they had sent one man, and that one man was about to bring an empire to its knees. Crothar the Unbreakable knelt before a silent crowd. His massive chest heaved, his 4 crimson eyes flickering between disbelief and growing panic. No one had ever done this to him, not in 100 battles, not in 1,000 years of Varkath. Dominance. The human stood over him, relaxed, loose, completely unafraid. Voss tilted his head, watching the warlord struggle to rise. "Still breathing, tough bastard?" The warlord roared and swung a desperate punch. Voss moved inside the strike. Again, A lightning-fast jab to the throat cut off Crothar's bellow, leaving him gagging instead. The crowd winced as the mighty warlord of the Dominion reeled from another pinpoint blow. The assembled alien dignitaries, the warlords, the rulers, the councillors, leaned forward, no longer entertained, no longer sneering. They were watching, studying, fearing, and for the first time they began to understand. Voss had fought his entire life, born on the Martian frontier, raised in the back alleys of Lunar Prime, hardened through war after war. He had never been the strongest, never the fastest, never the biggest. But he learned. Fights weren't about power. They weren't about size. They were about control. Vokat fought like predators, brutal, overwhelming, direct. It worked against almost every species in the galaxy. But humans were something else. They weren't the apex predators of Earth because they were stronger. They were the apex predators because they were smarter. High above, General Vornash, the Varkath strategist who had mocked humanity, was now gripping. The edge of his throne, his claws digging into the metal. His golden armor creaked under the pressure of his tensing muscles. This is not possible, he muttered. Ambassador Riker finally smiled. Isn't it? Below them, Rakvoth, the elder warrior, exhaled slowly. The human is not fighting for dominance. The others turned to him. What are you saying? Rakvoth's 4 eyes did not leave the fight. He is not trying to prove he is stronger. He is teaching. The word hung in the air, incomprehensible to the warlike species of the Dominion, but the truth was undeniable. Voss wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make a point. Crothar lunged again. It was sloppy, desperate. Voss sidestepped. A palm strike to the temple, a hook to the ribs, a bone-cracking stomp to the knee. Crothar collapsed, gasping. The crowd stopped breathing. Get up, Voss said, shaking his head. You wanted a fight, didn't you? Crothar pushed himself onto his hands and knees. The warlord, the terror of the arena, looked up at the human and saw nothing but confidence. No rage, no fury, no desperation, just calm, quiet, absolute control. That was the moment he knew he had already lost, and worse, this human was enjoying it. High above, the Dominion War Council had devolved into panic. This is unacceptable, one of the nobles hissed. He is embarrassing us. General Vornash's eyes burned with fury. We cannot allow this. But Rakvoth just stared at the arena, at the human, and for the first time in his long, bloodied life, he felt something he had never felt before. Dread. Crothar made one last attempt, one final, desperate charge. Voss caught his wrist, and then he twisted. With a sickening crack, the mighty warlord's arm was dislocated. Crothar howled. The sound echoed through the vast arena. The once roaring crowd of Dominion elites sat in absolute silence. Voss crouched beside his fallen opponent. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he whispered, just loud enough for the warlord to hear. You thought this was about strength. Crothar's breath shuddered. Voss leaned in closer. Strength is a lie. A pause. A beat of silence. Then Voss stood, cracked his knuckles and turned to the crowd. You wanted a show of strength, he called, voice steady, and I gave you a massacre. The weight of those words sank into the bones of every alien in attendance, and somewhere deep in their collective minds, an uncomfortable, terrifying realization settled like a virus. Humanity was not what they thought. Humanity was something far, far worse. They weren't warriors, they weren't conquerors, they were predators, and the galaxy had just become their hunting ground. Silence hung in the galactic arena, a silence that felt heavier than any war, more suffocating than any battlefield. Crothar knelt, broken before a single human. The warlord's breath came in ragged gasps, his massive frame trembling, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. He had never lost, not once, not in 1,000 years, until today. Voss stood over him, Arms relaxed, expression unreadable. The human wasn't panting. He wasn't exhausted. He was just waiting. Waiting for the galaxy to process what had just happened. High above, the Varkath High Command watched in horrified silence. This cannot be, one of the warlords whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Ambassador Riker exhaled through his nose. It is. General Vornash slammed his fist against the arm of his seat, scales rippling with fury. That human, this can't stand. We must. Rakvoth, the oldest of the warlords, spoke without turning. His voice was quiet. Final. It is already done. The others turned to him. The elder warrior's eyes remained fixed on the arena. He had lived through wars that spanned centuries, had commanded fleets that had reduced planets to cinders. But now for the first time he feared, not because of a single man's victory, but because of what that victory meant. This was never about the fight, Rakvoth muttered. It was never about winning, Vornash snarled. What are you saying? Rakvoth slowly turned to him, his gaze as sharp as a blade. This was a warning. And down in the arena, Voss finally spoke. Voss looked up at the assembled Dominion. Elites, they had laughed when he walked into the arena. They had mocked his kind, saw humans as lesser, as weak. Now, not a single voice dared to speak. He took a step forward, his boots echoing in the vast silence. His gaze swept across every alien ruler, every warlord, every general. You all thought this was a game, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. A test of strength, a spectacle. He gestured to the kneeling form of Krothar. This wasn't strength, Krothar flinched. Voss tilted his head slightly. Strength is primitive. It's a child's fantasy. And if you think for 1 second that strength alone is what makes a species dangerous. A slow, deliberate smile crept across his face. Then you have no idea what just stepped onto your galactic stage. The words landed like thunder. In the upper echelons of the arena, murmurs erupted. For centuries, the Varkath Dominion had seen themselves as the dominant force of the galaxy. Their empire had never been truly challenged. Their warriors had never been truly tested until today, until a single human walked into their arena, fought without a weapon, and dismantled their strongest champion. And he wasn't even humanity's best. That thought sank in like poison. If this man was just a soldier, if this was just one of them, what were the rest like? What was waiting for them out there? The once mighty warlord lifted his battered face. His jaw was swollen, his pride shattered, but his voice was still deep, still commanding. He looked at Voss with something no Varkath warrior had ever given a challenger before. Respect. You are not what we thought. His voice was hoarse, struggling. Your kind is not what we thought. Voss crouched down to his level, resting his arms on his knees. He studied the warlord for a moment, then gave a small nod. No, he agreed. We never are. Krothar inhaled shakily, eyes flickering to the golden seats of the Dominion rulers. He saw their fear, their shock, their uncertainty. He let out a low chuckle, blood dripping from his lips. They fear you now. Voss smiled. Good. Krothar gave him a slow, painful nod. I yield. The gong rang. The human had won. The galactic arena, once filled with roaring crowds, now stood in complete, deathly silence. It wasn't the loss of their champion that made the Dominion uneasy. It was the realization that everything had changed. Humanity had not just earned a place at the table, they had turned the entire table over. As Voss turned to leave, he made sure to lock eyes with the Varkath rulers. One last time, you wanted a show of strength, he said. He smiled. You got a lesson. Then he walked away, leaving the Dominion to wonder if they had just witnessed the beginning of their own downfall. Because they didn't just see a fighter, they saw a warning. A single human had done this. A single human had humiliated their greatest warrior. What would happen If humanity ever decided to stop playing fair, the galactic arena remained eerily silent long after Voss had left. The spectacle was over. The blood had been spilled. But the true impact of what had happened was only just beginning to sink in. The Dominion had demanded a show of strength. Humanity had given them a massacre. And now, for the first time in their empire's history, they were afraid. High above the arena, the Varkath rulers stood frozen, their golden thrones feeling smaller than ever. "This changes everything," one of them muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Rakvoth, the elder warlord, slowly rose from his seat. He turned to the others, his expression grim. "We were arrogant," he admitted. "We thought strength alone determined power. We were wrong." General Vornash scowled. "You speak as if we should fear them." Rakvoth's four crimson eyes darkened. "We should." The weight of his words settled over the entire council. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled through raw force. They had crushed species before they could rise, exterminated threats before they could grow. But humanity was something else. They were adaptable, strategic, relentless, and worst of all, they had patience. Rakvoth exhaled. "If one human could do this to our greatest warrior—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because everyone in the room was already thinking the same thing. What happens if humanity ever declares war? In the gladiator chambers below the arena, Crothar sat in silence, staring at the blood-stained floor. He had always believed in strength, that it was the only thing that mattered, that it was absolute. But that man had torn through him like a surgeon dissecting prey, not with superior force, not with advanced technology, with precision, with calm, ruthless efficiency. Crothar clenched his fists, then winced at the pain. His body was broken, but his mind was awakening to a terrifying truth. The Dominion had always seen humans as weak, but today they had learned the truth. Humans weren't weak. They were waiting for the galaxy to make the same mistake Crothar had made, waiting for the right moment to strike. As Voss walked out of the arena, Ambassador Riker fell into step beside him. "Well," the ambassador said, hands in his pockets. "That went better than expected," Voss smirked. "They'll think twice before underestimating us again." Riker nodded, glancing back toward the arena, where the most powerful leaders in the galaxy still sat in stunned silence. "They won't just think twice," he said. "They'll never stop thinking about it." Voss exhaled, stretching his arms. "Good." And with that, humanity left the arena, leaving behind nothing but a broken warlord, a humiliated empire, and a single, undeniable truth that the galaxy would never forget. Humanity had arrived, and the Dominion, they had just learned the hard way why that should terrify them. The end.